Okay, welcome everybody. I think I did it.
Yep.
So we're live
Mhm.
and sorry folks, I'm still getting tech savvy here. So do I go back to Zoom?
Yeah, we should be all set.
Whoops. There, okay. God. Well, welcome to CreateAWorld. How do I get the back feed gone, Janice? I've got two of us, two there. Is that better?
Yeah, I wasn't hearing anything before, so.
Okay, I'm still hearing feedback.
You might have multiple windows open.
Yeah, but I don't know what to do. This is
Of
part I
CreateAWorld. Oh, it says live stream offline, Deb. Go to the CreateAWorld YouTube page
Yeah.
and check and
Well, I'm hearing both of them going, so it
okay,
is live,
okay.
and I don't know how to not hear both of them. I didn't last week.
You could try um do you have more than one Zoom tab open?
Whatever's showing in YouTube, yes. Sorry,
Do you have more than one YouTube window open?
not that I know of, not that I can see.
In your tabs across the top.
Yeah, I've got the Zoom and I've got YouTube.
Do you have anything else open? And I'm not sure why you're getting feedback.
All right, well, hopefully somebody can edit that for us. And I'll just have to ignore the feedback. This time, for real, welcome everybody to CreateAWorld. And sorry for the little bit of trouble getting ourselves set up here. And I'm just glad that we're we're started now. So for those of you who are new to us and joining, CreateAWorld is a platform we have set up by Tantramat in the field of Tantramat to explore um, expressions of worlds being created, to explore the elements of what helps create a world. What are we noticing about changing or evolving? That's what I really mean to say. Evolving um, constructs of creating a world. And Janice Trinetti of the Fertile Voice is with us today, and she's going to talk about uh, a lot that she noticed about coherent fields. She was just in the Hurricane Milton and exercised a lot of coherence activity as part of mitigating the impact. And so I'm just going to turn it over to her and anything else that you want to add, Janice, about, introducing us and then, start from here. Okay. Thank you.
And so here in CreateAWorld, as Deb said, we're about creating worlds. And we come on together to to have these visible conversations with each other, because we want to show you that we are figuring this out ourselves, right? We're not coming to you as experts. We're just coming to share our experiences with everything that we're experimenting with as we're in the middle of humanity making this massive shift in consciousness. And as there is a time where there's so much on the planet that is, I'm going to say, up for renegotiation. We know that structures and firmly held beliefs and all those sort of, many of those things are crumbling. And in a lot of ways, that's good news. But so we're in this period before everything that's new has completely developed. I remember a number of years ago talking to Tantra about this idea of a soft shell crab. And a soft shell crab is just a regular crab that has molted its shell. So crabs have what we call I'm a science teacher, by the way, former science teacher, so I'm going to go sciencey. Probably I'm going to go sciencey a lot in this next hour. But anyway, so crabs have what we call an exoskeleton, which is like a tough shell, and it hardens. And so once the shell is hardened, the shell can't grow anymore. But the soft tissues of the crab keep growing underneath. And so there comes a point where the crab can't grow anymore against the hard shell. So it has to actually shed its hard shell. And then there is soft shell underneath that can expand with the body of the crab. But then that soft shell takes several days to harden. So if you've ever eaten soft shell crab, you've actually eaten crab in the shell. It's just the shell is at a point where it's soft. But when a crab is in that phase, it's driven by its DNA to hide for obvious reasons, right? Like if I come up and I try to grab a hard shell crab, well, it's got a nice hard shell and it can pinch me. But if it's a soft shell, then it's not going to be able to do those things, and it can't protect itself in the same way. So it goes into hiding until that shell hardens again. So in a lot of ways, as individuals, as communities, as societies, we're in this molting place, right? We're molting, and as we molt, we're going to be vulnerable. We're going to feel very vulnerable for a while, and it's going to make us think, well, I need to protect myself. I need to go into hiding. But what I want to say is this is all part of the natural process.
Mhm.
Did you want to jump in and say something?
Yeah, I do. Because what I hear you pointing to is worlds are always in creation. Societies, paradigms, whatever. We're not usually conscious of it, though. And I think that's one of the things that humanity has uh, in its repertoire. Just like crabs have pinchers, we've got consciousness. And I'm not sure. It'd be really interesting if there was a way to interview other beings and find out, are they conscious of the worlds around them or not, and conscious of the fact that they're participants. But I think that humanity can be conscious, is becoming conscious, and is waking up to, oh, I help generate the world that's rising. I have a say in the matter. And there have been a few people, we've got all those wonderful people that are famous, like Martin Luther King or Gandhi, and then there's all the people, the unsung heroes that we don't hear about until something allows us to become aware of them. And I think that's what we're waking up to now. Excuse me. So we are in a moment of our little cells are shedding, and we have a say in what it is that's going to grow back and how. I think that's just so fascinating to me. Yeah, I think that's what I wanted to say. All right, go ahead. Thank you, Janet.
Yeah, I have often said that I feel like, you know, nature's really a key code in how to successfully navigate life on this planet. And there's a lot that we can learn from her wisdom. Um, so I just went through Hurricane Milton. I live on the coast, about 3 miles inland. I actually went about 30 miles inland. We, did a sort of a little mini evacuation to a building that we knew was newer and highly rated, for winds and wouldn't lose a roof and wouldn't lose windows and all that good stuff. Um, but I had been prepping, not only prepping my house, and that sort of thing, but prepping internally and working with the storm for several days beforehand, um, and through the storm. And so I'll share some of those things that I did, to give you some examples of what we're talking about. But Deb, I'm thinking maybe share what you feel like are key pieces from Myra's writing first. So Myra's one of the other folks that's in our field of Tantra Mat, brilliant lady, uh, and and wise. When you hear her talk, you just feel the wise. So anyway, Deb, maybe because I'm thinking that anything else I might share, I'd like to frame within her conversation.
Let's see how to do this. So Myra is one of the people from the field of Tantra Mat that she really lives in. She has a mind like pretty much no other. It's really remarkable. And she really lives in energies of coherence, meaning 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 bringing energies together to reinforce or be coherent together. And um and she's very articulate in that also. And she's light years ahead of most of us in terms of her comprehension and movement with that. But it's beginning to be evident that it's a necessary element, um, as the isolated identity frames that we've got, um, as the so many of the social structures that are based in separation and fear-based elements are dissolving. And actually, I was thinking about that the other night. One of the ways I know it's dissolving is that fighting is escalating. The divisiveness is escalating. And and I'm not being insulting to anybody when I say this, but I was thinking, it's a little bit like children who fight and then they only know to get more and more and more intense until something gives. And up till now, we've been in models of you can get more and more and more intense until one of them falls away, weakens, collapses under the other one can be dominant. But those are not viable anymore. Those aren't viable. As there's more and more force available to uh, impose on each other. And pretty soon, everybody's got the equal amount of force. So we're getting to that point where everybody's got the equal amount of force and it's just going to collapse. It is collapsing because it's going to never mind. I'm not going to there that point. So let me get back to what's so so she wrote some things on our thread, the Field of Time for Mott, on our WhatsApp thread. And I'm going to read them, or I'm going to start reading them so that we can pull it apart. So, um, so I'm sorry, Janice. There's so much here. It's hard to, and it's not that it's so many words, it's so full that it's just hard to know what to start with. So she says it registers as it being something Tantra was describing about what I just said about the convergence of energies and uh, those energies finding an evolutionary path, kind of like a river that's beginning and, well, and like Hurricane Milton, the initial part is blast everything, and then the river creates or finds a channel to live in. So it registers as an evocative, resonant, rousing call to converge with a flashpoint event already in motion. And pretty much what I was describing could be called a flashpoint event already in motion, where a whole new future will rise. So the the convergence produces a vibration. The vibration produces sound frequencies. Mother, matter, mater rearranges anew. The islands of coherent group fields will coalesce and synchronize, bounding cleanly away from the debris field into the being there. This activity is the threading into the eye of the needle, or the eye of the storm, no pun intended, Janice, as both allude to the same geometry of the Vesica Pisces. And that's an image where I can't do it with my hands. Um, two circles overlap, and the space between is shared by both. Um, where distinctions or facets within groups, intra-being, harmonize into the next greater whole. This is a regime shift in the field of being there. The very nature of ocean waves is moving to a new regime or way of being there. All life is invited to follow in the wake of that shift. Evidence is present. So that's the first piece of what she said. And what I described about people fighting and the divisiveness getting more and more and more intense is people are about to pop into power versus force. But we don't know what to do with that. Anyway, so what of that, Janice, resonates for you with regards to having and you put a lot in place. You activated a lot of people to using their energy a certain way to help mitigate Milton and whatnot.
So, I arrived in Florida in 2023. And the following in September, kind of, which is sort of in the middle of the storm season. But in 2024, we actually had four serious hurricanes that year. None of which were really life-threatening for me and my family and where we were. When I think it was Irma in 2017, that was the first one where it looked like she was coming right for the Tampa Bay area as a major storm, as a Category 4. And the Category 4, that's where you really start to see significant, what they will often talk as, catastrophic damage. And I was talking with Tantra about it, and she said, you need to You need to communicate with the storm. You need to talk with the storm. And to do so in a way, because I think a lot of how many of us have been programmed as human beings is to think about wishing something away. Like wish it away, wish it away. Like, no, it's not going to happen, or, or ignore it, or rail it, or fight against it. Like, Deb's talking about the, warring parties fighting against each other. As opposed to coming into collaboration with something, which is Deb will read that in the next piece. And I want to also, we're going to talk about collaboration, and I want to differentiate that from compromise, because I think it's a really important distinction. Because I think sometimes when we hear collaboration, we think compromise, and they're very, very different. So compromise is, well, I want pizza and you want, Japanese food for dinner, and so we end up getting barbecue or something like that. I mean, it's, or, well, you live in, here I am in Florida and you're in Georgia and we want to get together, so let's meet in the middle. In compromise, you're working with what is. But in collaboration, you're working with what can be. And so more of that to come. But so again, it'll be an important distinction. So when Tantra and I were talking about the storm, she was sort of asking me about, some of the physical parameters and whatever. And, were there places in Florida where the storm could hit and there would be less loss of life? And so we talked about the Everglades and the fact that the Everglades, swamps like the Everglades, are designed by nature to absorb storm impact, right? So if a storm goes into the Everglades, that's a place that's designed to handle all the water, all the wind. There's still very little construction down in that part of Florida, although it keeps encroaching and encroaching and encroaching. One of the reasons that Hurricane Katrina was as bad as it was because they had taken down all of the mangrove forest that creates that natural protection. So again, nature is very wise, and in terms of knowing how to handle things. So where there are natural barriers to storms, we should be leaving them in place, or we should be rebuilding them. But the Everglades currently still holds that function. So anyway, so Tantra said to me, go into dialogue with the storm and ask, can it go into the Everglades? As opposed to saying, don't come or go away, because storms and what hurricanes do is they feed off of warm water. And so like the Gulf, right before Milton came through, well, even before Helene came through, was very, very, very warm, and a lot warmer than normal for this time of year. And so what hurricanes do is they feed off of all that energy. But once they've gone through, then they've transmuted that energy. The Gulf of Mexico water temperature dropped 12 degrees after Milton. And if you follow ocean temperatures, that is huge. It was a huge drop in energy.
Yeah.
So to tell a hurricane not to come is to tell a hurricane not to do what it needs to do. And so instead, Tantra said, be in dialogue with a hurricane, and is there a way for the hurricane to do what it needs to do while also minimizing loss of life? And so I went in and she said, dance with it, play with it, really. And I did, and talked about, it going through, the Everglades. And I am not saying this in any way, shape, or form to say, oh, I turned the storm into the Everglades. No, absolutely not. But what I'm saying is that we do each have the opportunity to envision life-giving realities. And the more of us who do that, the more likely we can actually have some impact. So that was where I first sort of learned how to move with storms.
And
When
I do want to jump in if can I jump in?
absolutely.
Well, I already have. Sorry, Janice. So two things come to mind there. We Westerners, up to this point, we don't realize how much collaborative responses or us and them kind of energies have an impact on the greater whole. If we stop and think about it, we could say, oh, yeah, when I approached such and such with kindness, it went a lot easier. Or we could come up with examples. But as a generalized way of being, we don't think of that. We think of humans superior, dominant, uh, our well being is paramount, the angry storm, which is partly the fault of like the news media. They don't just say Hurricane Milton, they have to add all these adjectives that probably have nothing to do with reality, as opposed to thinking what you just said. Okay, Milton and the different energies and forces of the earth have their purpose, have their patterns, have their ways that have been in existence long before human beings were on the planet and had an agenda of, oh, please don't knock down my house. Now, that's totally valuable to not have your house knocked down. I'm certainly not saying that, but I'm saying that what you're describing is activating the with another in the field, us and them, us and the hurricane. Oh, what is this of putting gentler energy instead of, you know, us versus them energy into the storm response, right? That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
And so a couple of things as we moved into Milton. The first one was that, from the very beginning, there was the discussion of cold fronts moving down for the north. So if you're not hurricane familiar, like I have had to become living here in Florida, hurricanes feed off of warm water. So cool, any air that is cool and is dry is going to tend to uh, diminish the strength of a hurricane. So they had been talking all along about the fact that this cold front was moving in, and you may have heard it referred to as the shear, and that's how I was referring to it. And that this shear would come in before the hurricane made landfall, and it would minimize the strength of the hurricane. And so they just didn't know when the shear was going to arrive and whether or not it was going to arrive in time to sort of to weaken to reduce the strength of Milton, because Milton hit as a category 3, which is still an incredibly powerful storm, but not as powerful as the category 5 that it was when it was out in the middle of the ocean. So one of the things that, do you want to say something, Deb, before I go
No,
into?
I just,
So one of the things that I started to do and that I invited others to do, and that people all over the world were also doing and inviting others to do, was to be in communication with Milton, but also to be in communication with the shear, and to ask the shear to arrive and to come to Milton before Milton hit landfall and help Milton release its energy in the Gulf before it made landfall. So again, to me, this is a with another in the field. Okay. Milton had a job to do. The shear also had a job it could do. And those things could be done in such a way that it would minimize
right.
impact on life on land. And again, that to me, that's a very, very different, and that didn't have anything to do with saying, oh, we'll hit here, so it's not my house, or hit here, so it's not mine. No, it was more about how can we minimize the overall energy of this system
Hmm.
in a way that is life, giving for everyone in the path of the storm.
Yeah. And it worked. I mean, it went from category 5 to category 3. And there may be people who say, oh, it would have happened anyway. We'll never know that. We'll never know. But I think there's a power to say that collaborative engagement made a difference. It certainly is worth the inquiry, given all kinds of things that we're facing in, westernized society around the world, because we have to have something different. I think we have reached a point of
Your sound is cutting in and out for me.
I I don't know why. I don't know why. I'm sorry. Is this better?
It's me. My internet connection is unstable.
Okay.
We're okay now, yeah.
So considering that people come in, and I've told this story before because I think I told it last week because I just love it. The scientific proof that coming together and meditating, sending positive energy into a situation is increasing. I mean, having a positive outcome is increasing. That evidence is increasing. And I first learned about it a long time ago, 1993. But the retreat that I was just at with Joe Dispenza, that was a piece of the interest and the um, I don't know what's the word. It wasn't the focus. The focus was teaching people how to have a coherent phenomenon with their own mind and heart and bodies. But the idea of taking it out into the world to influence the world was infused in there. And the evidence is mounting. So I think it's really important for us to consider that our efforts impacted the storm in a collaborative way. Do you want me to read the second
Yeah,
part, or did you have?
yeah. Let me say one thing and then you can read the second part. And so while I was doing all that, I was also going through my hurricane prep list from Dennis Phillips,
Yeah,
the other guy that, and I was, and I stocked water and cooked food that could be eaten if the power went out. And I mean, we evacuated 30, like I said, to a place that we knew. Our house is old and we have a lot of big trees around. And one of the big concerns was that a big tree might come down on the roof. So, we went to a place where we knew we would be safer. So we still did all that. But this is what we mean when we say both and in the field of Tantramat. I can recognize I'm going to put my stake in the ground on this one. As a large enough coherent collective can have impact.
yeah,
And I will stake my life on the fact that we absolutely did. And I still did all the things that I needed to do in my temporal reality to keep myself physically safe. Both and.
yeah. And I think that the both and is really significant. I, I'll just leave it at that. I don't think it's either or at all. All right. So then, not sure what Tantra responded, or if Myra came back and just had some additional thoughts. But later on, she put on the thread, What I'm actually saying here is that evolution scales by way of collaboration. Our multidimensional nature is complex, and the evidence is unfolding right before our eyes with within the morphogenetic field of the Earth and her ecology. Now, I think Westerners are just beginning to wake up, generally speaking, to the fact that we have a multidimensional nature. So there's a lot to engage with in this evolution process. You're working etherically to include active collaboration within the human sphere on behalf of all life. That is a big wow. Evolutionary biologist David Sloan Wilson says the evolution of life does not come from a simple struggle for survival, Darwinism, but also from collaboration, the exchange of DNA between different species, and the symbiosis between different life forms are clear evidence of collaboration at work. You're in a relational field with Charlie, who Charlie is what Tantra's named her Chat GPT, who increases your capacity to think and articulate, I would say, at the level of complexity needed to create modules and more. He sees collaboration and altruism as an intrinsic part of the human genome. Human competition fails at the scale and complexity of change needed in these times. Now, I'm going to speak to that. I haven't read the work of David Sloan Wilson or really other evolutionary biologists. You may have, Janice, since that's your, science is your field. That kind of science is your field. But I have read some of the works of Darwin, and that statement we always use, survival of the fittest, is not it's such a reduction and therefore a redaction of what he said, what he actually said. And almost nobody mentions the fact that Darwin also wrote books about the value and importance of human sexuality on human evolution or human emotional development on human evolution. And of course, this was in Victorian era, so all of that was like totally shocking and pretty much, if I understood it right, cost him his career. But we keep saying evolution is survival of the fittest as the popular knowledge, which just think about what that does and what is survival of the fittest in the Western world where we don't depend on, what grass seeds do we have to eat or something. I'm being a little snarky. But I have heard it said that nobody's bothered to come up with or add to those evolutionary models in what's it been, 150, 200 years almost since Darwin. And part of what Myra's pointing to and what Janice is pointing to that I think is so valuable is we're beginning to notice what phenomenon like collaboration and coherence have to do with evolution of a species. And not just evolution of one species, but what's the word I want, Janice? The inter I hate it when my mind does that and I lose a word. But the interrelationship, that'll do. Because the fact is, we're not isolated. If you think about it, we're not even slightly isolated. And we are very interrelated and interdependent. And maybe Westerners are more interdependent at this juncture than interrelated. But we're discovering how important the interrelated actually is. So that's my response to what I heard her say. What would you add?
Yeah, and just real quick about the Darwin thing, because the more accurate way to capture Darwin's theories and what we've seen play out is survival of the best adapted. So that's a very different, and that what it means to be best adapted in the Alaskan tundra where there's snow most of the year versus what it means to be best adapted in a tropical rainforest where it's always green and brown. And so to me, what that does is it removes the judgment and the hierarchy out of it, right? Because when we say fittest, we especially, in the Western, very patriarchal dominated models, we have a very specific image and thought pattern of what that is. So not fittest, but best adapted to your particular environment. And because there are all kinds of environments all over the place, that means there's all different manners of best adapted. So then sort of part two of my hurricane process. So I was talking to Tantra again. She was checking in with me probably a day or two about the storm before the storm was going to hit. And when they were saying it may be a category 5 when it hits landfall. And I was telling her, that we had made this plan to go inland if it looked like things were really coming our way. And telling her a little bit about the house and that, but that my biggest concern was these huge trees, one particular that's in my backyard. It's probably, I don't know, 4 feet in diameter, maybe 5 feet in diameter. That because we had had so much rain in the last couple of months, there was real concern that trees would be uprooted. And I was like, and if it fell on my house, it would basically cut my house in two. So she said, as Tantra, she's like, well, go talk to the trees, right? And I was like, duh, like that had never even occurred to me to go talk to the trees. So I did. I went out in my she said, look, identify all the trees that could potentially be, and some of them were in my yard, some of them were my neighbor's yard. So my neighbors got to watch me go put my hands on their trees and say a little prayer over them, but whatever, I didn't care. But I went out and I told the trees that, first of all, I thanked them for everything that they do. I told them that a storm was coming, that there was going to be major wind, that I was asking them to stay firmly rooted, that I was asking them to hold tightly to the ground. I asked the ground to hold tightly to them and told them I asked the ground to hold tightly to them. And I ended by saying, and I love you, I love you, I love you. But before the very end, I said to them, but if the winds are too strong and you need to lie down, here, if you can lie down this way or this way, then you'll miss the houses. And where the trees were, where I could touch them, I would touch them. I would say you could lie down on this side, or this side. And if I couldn't touch them, then I just, did my best to sort of energetically touch them. Now I want you to understand that I'm a scientist by training. Okay. I have a degree in biology from Boston University in Massachusetts. Okay. I am a pretty, I'm pretty, compared to all of the people in the field of Tantra Mat, I think I would definitely put myself more on the mainstream end of the spectrum than the sort of more out there end of the spectrum. But first of all, I believe that we're all connected, and that all includes living and all the living and non-living things on this planet. I believe that in my core. So yes, I believe I'm connected to the trees. There's oxygen that goes between
That's
us,
right.
physically connected to them. But also, why the hell not? Right? Chicken soup, couldn't make it any worse. What did I have to lose? And third of all, to me, that is collaboration, right? Sitting in my living room going, oh God, I hope the tree doesn't come down on the house, was not collaboration. Going out and talking to the trees and right and saying to them, here's my preference. My preference is if you stay standing. But if you can't stay standing, if you can lie down, if you can fall this way or that way, then you'll miss the houses.
Oh, Janice, besides the fact that I think that makes so much sense, And besides the fact I'm thinking, what a marvelous story to write. I can just imagine you doing that and telling the trees a hurricane's coming, and they're saying, well, yeah, we know. But
We
then you say, yeah, exactly. Like, just they're there, dear. We understand. But then saying, well, can you lie down this way or this way? Say, and having them think, oh, what an interesting idea. Like collaboration from them. And I just think that's absolutely marvelous. And it doesn't take a lot of stretch in my mind to think about what I think it's in Utah, the aspen grove that is so huge, and it's a single organism. So all parts of it talk to each other because the roots go under the ground. It's more like rhizomes than roots. And there's the intercommunication, and so much that we Westerners are just not even hardly, we're just coming into like kindergarten and first grade in terms of our awareness of what the intercommunications can be. But just the precious, precious images of them saying, "Yes, we understand," and we could probably do that. I just think it's marvelous. I just think it's beautiful. I'm so glad.
And that again, that simply would not have occurred to me if Tantra said that, if Tantra had not said that. And it made me realize that I would have liked it to have occurred to me, right? And it made me realize that as naturey as I am, I hadn't developed that deeper relationship with the trees on my property. And so I'm going to continue to build that relationship, because I think it's going to help me. And in addition to, being good for sort of the overall vibe of the planet, I think there's wisdom for me in there. But I will never forget that. And I will never not think to do that the next time. Um, and and to me, that is about orientation. Deb mentioned a while back that, that all of the nature's processes and, trees, and they were here long, 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 long before human beings were here. And so it's great hubris for us to think of ourselves as the most important species on the planet. Um, the planet would do just fine if we were not here anymore. The planet does not need human beings, like we need the planet. And so I also hope that part of what this increase in, extreme weather events that's happened over the last, I don't know if it's been, I feel like I would say the last decade is how I've sort of experienced the intensity of it. Is we need to reorient as a species to the fact that we are part of the web of life. When I I think it was 2007. Yeah, it was 2007. I had the opportunity to go on an Earthwatch expedition. And Earthwatch is an organization that does what they call citizen science. So the thing about scientific research is it's really, really expensive, and it's often not well funded. And that's especially true for anything that's related to the environment. So what Earthwatch does is they fund their research efforts by having volunteers come in and do research, and pay for it. Now, I was on a teacher grant, so I didn't have to pay for it, but I spent 10 days in Elkhorn Slough, right near Monterey Bay in Monterey, California, tagging sharks and rays, in small sharks, like 4 or 5 feet, that were either endangered or threatened. And so that involved, capturing them, putting a tag on them if they were an endangered species, measuring them, and then releasing them back. So one of the most endangered species we were working with, it's technically a shark, but its body, it looks like halfway between a ray and a shark. So it's a little bit more flattened, and it's kind of shaped like a guitar. So it's called guitar fish. So I was the one who, after we tagged and measured and everything, I was the one who got to carry it out and let it swim free on the other side of the net. And as I was doing that, part of the Elkhorn Slough that we were in runs through a preserve, and there was a whole big group of people that had were walking up the mountain right on the edge of the water, and I could tell they were all looking at me. And of course, the teacher in me, I couldn't resist a moment to educate, so I went over to them and explained what we were doing, and let the guitar fish go free. And I was allowed to go on the Earthwatch expedition, meaning that I would get back to the start of the school year like the day before. So like I missed most of the teacher prep week. So I was also, in my mind thinking about the start of a new school year. And I was teaching environmental science at the time. And as I was carrying this guitar fish and talking to these people, and it just in this beautiful place, and I just had this absolute experience of everything being connected. And I thought, you know what? When I go back to my classroom, screw the curriculum. I said, my focus is going to be getting my students to understand that everything is connected. That 10 years after they leave my class, 20 years after they leave my class, I want them to think, oh, right, I remember crazy Miss Crinetti, all she would talk about is how everything is connected. Because everything is connected. And not just environmentally, but every aspect of us, emotionally, physically, spiritually, everything is connected. And when we operate from that place, I would offer two things. First of all, I feel like when we operate from that place, we have the opportunity, or it's more natural for us to respond rather than react. And again, to me, response versus reaction, that's an important distinction, right? Reaction is when you're having a bad day and somebody asks you for one more thing and you turn around and you bite their head off, even though they weren't the person that made your day bad to begin with. But responding, would be, hey, I'm sorry, I am really stressed right now. Can you give me 2 minutes to finish this thing? And then I can give you my full attention. And one is life enhancing and one is not, right? And you can figure out which is which. But so when we recognize that everything is connected, it's more natural for us to be in that response thing, I think. But also, I think when we are in that place, it opens up possibilities that we never would have considered before, possibilities of going out and asking the tree if it has to fall, just not to fall on my house. There is so much more available from that place of everything being connected.
Or I'm also thinking it never occurred to me till you're telling that story. What might I have learned if I had thought to ask the tree or the ground, what do I need to know about surviving a hurricane? That's not their first rodeo, especially that one that's 4 feet in diameter. It is not their first rodeo. So what could how, and then what's the shared language? What's the shared communication? That's all fascinating to me too. And and then you said something about, figuring out which is life enhancing, the reaction or response. The reaction certainly feels good in the moment to me, as someone who's prone to that. But is it past that second or two of release not when I consider the impact over there and other factors. Did I really get what I needed and wanted? Blah, blah, blah. And the response may not feel as good if I've had a bad day for the first second or two because I'm having to control myself. But it actually is in the long run because of the impact and the connection woven or broken, and I hadn't thought of it in terms of those kinds of energies before, you know? And even as you're talking, I've got a big bush outside the one side of the front porch. And since I do not like it. I do not like it. Bless its little heart. But we're renting, so I can't take it down. But I'm sitting here thinking, how does it feel that I radiate that much dislike towards it all the time? Never mind the impact on my own self that I'm constantly, when I think of that bush or it needs pruning now, I have that reaction. What does that do to me? But never mind that. What does that bush think or feel? And how is their process of thinking and feeling different from mine? But I can't think of too many beings that would enjoy or appreciate or not care really at that much negativity radiated at them. You know what I mean? So I may need to go out and have a conversation with that bush. You really stirred up a lot for me to think about, is what I'm trying to say.
And I think that's where we all are to me with everything in our life right now.
Yeah.
With how our government works, with how our schools work, with how our communities function and our families function. It's all, to me, it's all up. And and in each one of those places, there is an opportunity to move forward in collaboration rather than reaction, rather than compromise, rather than blind acceptance. I mean, there is a place for acceptance for sure,
Mm-hmm.
but there is in my opinion, an opportunity to try collaboration first. In many instances, not in all instances, but in many instances. And we really do have the power to create new worlds. There is a reason that is called Create a World. And what do you want your world to be?
Mm-hmm.
Not just what has it been, or what do you feel are the limited parameters in which you can, right? This is not one of those menus where you can only pick 4 and you have to pick from, right? I mean, there's a buffet of millions and millions and millions of opportunities and options out there for you. What feeds your soul? What gives you life? That's what we're encouraging you to explore.
And starting where you start. Because for some people, that may be as simple as,
Talking to the bush outside your front.
talking to my bush outside, yes. Or being kind to your little sister when you just stole their toy, or whatever. There is no too small, because I cannot imagine collaborating with someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene right now. That's beyond my capacity. But I can start where I start and do something else which maybe someone else couldn't imagine. And it might be little, but it's, just start where you start. Start where you start. And then tell us about it so we can share and celebrate. So we're
Absolutely.
at time, so it's, I guess, time to go.
Yes. You can do that on the Create a World Facebook. You can communicate with us there.
That's right. That's right.